Hello, my name is Nina Barela, and I'm going to be talking with you a little bit about EMDR as a therapeutic intervention. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and it is typically used to address trauma in individuals. It can also be used to address anxiety and a host of other presentations, but it started out as specifically a trauma-related treatment, and it uses eye movements, tapping, physical movements, and even sound that is bilateral, so that is experienced on one side of the brain and then the next. And it was discovered in the 1990s that by stimulating your brain in a bilateral fashion, it can help you reprocess or store difficult memories and experiences in a way that they are less emotionally taxing. And so EMDR has its roots in trauma, and it also has many other applications as well with many other mental health presentations. EMDR has an 8-phase model, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those phases. So the first phase is history taking, and that is quite typical of an initial therapy session, but with an EMDR clinician, you will probably get a much more in-depth history taking session. It may be chronological to discuss your entire lifetime to date so that any and all memories that are relevant to the EMDR process can be discovered. And history taking might be 1 or 2 or even 3 sessions, depending on the issues that you're coming into session with. The second phase is the client preparation phase. And this is a really important phase because it allows you to learn skills necessary to manage your emotional reactions, to manage your affective reactions. EMDR can create a lot of emotional disruption, and we want to make sure that you remain in your window of tolerance. So we want you to be able to manage, going through these difficult memories in a way that is not too painful or uncomfortable. So client preparation can include breathing exercises, positive affirmations, distress tolerance skills or emotional regulation skills, maybe ACT or CBT training, um, and even some somatic work or vagal toning. And again, it's to give you the power to manage your affective response. Visual imagery is a really commonly used intervention with EMDR. So it's more than likely that you will have a peaceful place that you and your therapist will develop, which is a peaceful, relaxing place that you create in your mind and you can go to and enhance using your 5 senses. Container is another visual imagery intervention that EMDR therapists use often, and it is essentially creating an imaginary container that we can hold difficult memories or emotions or even thoughts until we're ready to work on them. So it's just an example of some client preparation. The third phase of EMDR is the assessment phase, and that is working with your therapist. You will come up with a list of target memories, and most of the time they're related to a specific negative core belief or negative cognition, and that's something that you will develop in conjunction with your therapist. And we'll look at each of those target memories and consider the emotions and the body sensations around them, as well as the subjective units of discomfort related to them. So how distressing those memories are for you in this moment. And once we get that sorted out and organized, we'll move on to the desensitization phase. And that is where the bilateral stimulation comes in. So EMDR initially was eye movement desensitization. So I'm just going to show you an example of an eye movement app that is used for telehealth. And this is what, as the client, you'll see. This is the sun going across the screen. So your therapist will ask you to focus on a specific target image while also considering your emotions, your body sensations, and the subjective unit of discomfort level, and she will initiate the bilateral stimulation, and your brain will sort of pick up and do the rest of the work. According to EMDR's adaptive information processing theory, our brain has an incredible ability to heal itself. And it's going to make specific neural connections and reconnections so that you can consider your traumatic experiences or your difficult emotions in a more adaptive way. Once we've completed the desensitization phase, we move on to installation. And so I talked about the adaptive information processing theory model. Your brain will also come up with an alternative positive cognition or positive core belief to replace that negative core belief. And so installation will have your therapist ask you to bring up that target image that we desensitize and then have that positive cognition held next to it. And we're going to continue with some more eye movements to install that positive cognition. The next phase of EMDR is the body scan. So I talked about, in that assessment phase, we discuss what body sensations come up when we talk about specific memories, and clearing, body sensations in EMDR is a really important process because, as we know, trauma and difficult experiences and emotions are held in our body. They're held physically. So our ability to also desensitize them really is powerful for the healing process. And phase 7 of EMDR, that's the closure phase. So that's going to occur at the end of every session, really, because your therapist wants to make sure that you can come back to present and really ground yourself and emotionally regulate yourself so that you can end that session and go on with your life until the next session. Closure is also important once we complete one of the target summary sections of EMDR. The 8th phase is reevaluation, and that occurs once the subjective units of discomfort or distress are all at 0, and then the validity of cognition of the installed positive cognitions are 7 out of 7. So then we reevaluate and say, okay, well, what do we need to work on next, or have we completed everything we need to work on? I enjoy this image of EMDR because it is very much a circular process. In some ways, we may, be in client preparation, move on to assessment and desensitization, and for whatever reason, we may have to go back to preparation, right, to continue those emotional regulation skills. Or we might get to body scan and then recognize there's something we didn't clear and, move back to desensitization again. So the idea that it is circular, I think, is important versus linear, because it is very much an interactive model of change and care. So that is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's important to note that before starting desensitization, your therapist will also come up with a stop signal for you so that you can feel that you're in control of how fast or how slow we go in this process. You do not have to overexert yourself emotionally or physically to get through EMDR. Again, we want you to remain in your window of tolerance, and we're going to just push out the edges of that window of tolerance. EMDR, in addition to its desensitization qualities, has a resourcing quality. So, slow tapping while focusing on something that's positive or enjoyable or joyful can actually enhance those feelings too. And that's something that your therapist may also work on with you during the EMDR treatment process. So thank you so much for listening to my video. My name is Nina Barela. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me at nina@helpingmoon.com.